Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fascinating journey into the world of microeconomics. We're going to move right past the intimidating math and hand you a highly practical toolkit for understanding human behavior. It's all about revealing those invisible forces that drive the everyday choices we all make. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever wondered if breaking a window could somehow actually make a society richer? Or, on a slightly more delicious note, how your brain actually decides between a slice of pizza and a juicy burger. Now, these might sound like completely random puzzles, but they hold the absolute secret to understanding how our choices work. Section 1. The Decision Maker's Toolkit. Let's look at how we actually view the economic world around us. So, if you watch the news, you probably hear a ton about macroeconomics, right? The big picture stuff like GDP growth rates, inflation, and whole economies. But the actual focus of our explainer today is microeconomics. It's the study of, well, you. It's the study of individual decision-making under constraints. We're looking at how a single person or a single firm decides exactly what to do next.
Now, you might be thinking, look, I just make practical choices. I don't use economic theory. Well, the famous economist John Maynard Keynes once pointed out that practical men who believe themselves to be exempt from intellectual influence are usually the slaves of some defunct economist. Basically, what he meant is that even the most practical doers among us are constantly influenced by theoretical frameworks, whether we realize it or not. And that is exactly why we need to build our mental toolkit deliberately. And the absolute bedrock of that toolkit is this concept right here, scarcity. Without scarcity, economics wouldn't even need to exist. Think about it. If we lived in this magical world where we could just have everything instantly, there'd be no need to make a choice. But we have fundamental limitations. We have limited money, limited hours in the day, and yes, limited stomach capacity. You literally cannot have everything, which means you are constantly forced to choose. Section 2. The power of incentives. Let's look at the engine that actually drives those choices. So if scarcity forces us to make choices, what actually pushes us toward one option over another? Incentives. An incentive is simply anything that motivates you to choose option A over option B. And people often think economists only care about money. But incentives aren't just financial. An incentive can be the social status you gain, getting good grades, the religious promise of a better afterlife, or even a negative incentive, like avoiding a strongly worded email from your professor. Seriously, anything that gets you to move is an incentive. And this brilliantly illustrates just how powerful those incentives can be. Back in the day, English ship captains were paid to transport convicts to Australia. Initially, they were paid for every prisoner who boarded the ship in England. The result? The captains had zero financial reason to keep the prisoners alive on that brutal voyage, and the mortality rate was terribly high. But then, somebody cleverly shifted the incentive. They started paying the captains only for the prisoners who actually disembarked in Australia. Instantly, the captains had a massive reason to ensure everyone survived, and the survival rate skyrocketed. Just a tiny tweak to the incentive completely changed human behavior. Section 3. Trade-offs and opportunity costs. Now let's see how we actually measure the weight of these choices. Okay, so there's that old saying that you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? In economics, we call this opportunity cost. It's the cost you incur by giving up your next best alternative. If your stomach only has room for one meal and you say yes to a burger, you are simultaneously saying no to a pizza. That missed pizza, that is your very real opportunity cost. Every single minute of your day has an opportunity cost attached to it.
Let's look at a real-world policy example to see how critical this really is. A few years ago, the local government in Delhi wanted to encourage more women to use public transport, so they rolled out Policy Choice 1, making bus travel free for women. On the surface, sounds like a fantastic policy, but the Transport Corporation had severely limited funds. By using their scarce resources to subsidize free travel, they suffered a massive opportunity cost. They couldn't afford Policy Choice 2, which was buying much-needed new buses. The result was that while the city's population exploded by nearly 50%, the number of buses barely increased, leading to intensely dangerous crowding. Opportunity costs are always there, even when our intentions are completely good.
Section 4. The broken window fallacy. What happens when we completely ignore these hidden, invisible costs?
Let's revisit that question from the beginning. Does breaking a window boost the economy? Imagine someone throws a rock through your window. Your neighbor walks over and says, "Hey, cheer up. You have to hire a repairman, and he'll take your money and buy a burger, and the cafe owner will buy more coffee." This broken window is secretly a great thing for the economy. So, is your neighbor right?
Actually, no way.
Your neighbor is committing the famous broken window fallacy. This fallacy only looks at what is immediately seen, the money paid to the repairman, but it completely ignores the unseen opportunity cost. Think about it. If your window hadn't broken, you'd still have an unbroken window, and you could have used that repair money to buy yourself a nice pair of shoes or your own coffee. Destruction does not equal growth. Whenever you see a delayed construction project pouring money into an economy or a disaster requiring massive rebuilds, remember the broken window. The money spent fixing problems could have been used to create brand new value.
So the crucial point here is that failing to understand opportunity costs leads to really poor framing, especially in major policies. During the global pandemic, we constantly heard the debate framed as lives versus livelihoods. But as the source material points out, this is a false dichotomy. Without a life, there is no livelihood. A much more rational, economic way to frame this incredibly difficult choice was comparing two real opportunity costs: deaths caused by the virus versus deaths caused by the economic devastation of lockdowns. Now, it doesn't make the choice any less painful, for sure, but framing the trade-off correctly is absolutely crucial for making rational decisions.
Section 5. Thinking at the margin. Time to see how we optimize these choices logically. To truly master rational decision-making, we need the final piece of our toolkit. Economists don't really believe we make categorical, all-or-nothing choices. When you sit down for breakfast, you aren't deciding between eating all the carrots in the world versus all the broccoli in the world. Instead, you make incremental choices based on marginal utility. And marginal utility is simply the additional happiness you gain from consuming just one more bite or one more unit of something. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it perfectly visualizes diminishing marginal utility in action. Look at what happens when you eat mangoes. That very first mango, amazing. It gives you 500 utils, or units of happiness. But by the time you eat the second mango, you're a bit fuller, right? So it only gives you 200 utils. By the third mango, you're getting stuffed, and it only adds 50 utils of happiness. The more you have of something, the less value the next unit holds. It's why finding $1 on the street means so much less to a billionaire than it does to someone with empty pockets. Section 6. Visualizing our everyday choices. Let's see how economists actually graph these trade-offs out. So we know we make incremental choices, and we're always weighing trade-offs. When you're balancing two things you like, let's say free time and good grades, you have a marginal rate of substitution. This is the exact rate at which you are willing to trade one thing for the other while staying exactly as happy. If you have tons of free time but terrible grades, you'd gladly give up a lot of leisure hours just to get one extra grade point. But if you have straight A's and zero free time, that rate flips completely. You'd gladly sacrifice a grade point just to get an hour of sleep. Your rate of substitution constantly changes based on what you already have. Let's move on and see how this builds into something called an indifference curve. Economists map out our preferences using these curves, and a totally rational consumer's graph follows very strict geometric rules. First, they are always downward sloping, because to get more of one thing, you have to give up another. Second, they're perfectly smooth curves, since we make choices in tiny marginal increments. Third, they can absolutely never cross, because that would just break the logic of math and preference. And finally, the higher the curve is pushed up and to the right, the happier you are because you're getting more of everything. But of course, human preferences can be wonderfully peculiar, and that changes the graph. If you view tea and coffee as perfect substitutes, like you just want caffeine, your curve is a straight line because you'll trade them at a constant, rigid rate. But what if you view tea and biscuits as perfect complements? You literally need them together. Having 5 cups of tea and only 1 biscuit doesn't make you any happier than having one of each. You need them in strict proportion to get any extra utility. In that case, your graph turns into a rigid L-shaped curve. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the Microeconomic Toolkit. We've seen that every single choice is driven by incentives, constrained by scarcity, and weighed down by unseen opportunity costs. Economics isn't just about money. It is the fundamental study of how you live your life. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you face a difficult decision, whether it's about public policy or just picking what to have for dinner, what invisible opportunity cost are you leaving on the table? Thank you so much for watching this explainer, and I really hope you start seeing the hidden economics in your everyday life.